Robert E. Howard, one of the best things about his best dramatic boxing stories is characterization and setting, and immediately painting a picture in a few pages. I mean, you understand motivation, you understand outcome, you realize exactly what there's no guessing what's going to happen. There's no guessing why it's going to happen, and you immediately side with the guy you want him to. That he wants you to side with, whether he's an anti-hero or whether he's a easy to spy hero. You know that's the hero, no matter what. And so I'm going to read you this story was let's see, Dime Sports Magazine, 1936. It's a couple months. This was published just a couple months before he committed suicide. So it's called Fist of the Desert, and I think it was published as Iron Jaw. Yeah, Iron Jaw. I don't know why they changed his titles. His titles, they're much better. Fist of the Desert. A small, and this is not humorous, a small railroad station. Its sun-blistered paint cracking in the heat. Across the tracks, a scattering of adobe huts, a cluster of frame buildings. That was Yucca Junction, baking in the desert that stretched from horizon to distant horizon. Up and down in the scanty, breathless shade of the little station, Al Lyman paced restlessly, his patent leather shoes grinding dryly in the cinders. A small man, Lyman, with narrow, stooped shoulders, cheap, flashy, a product of city slums, predatory beak of a nose, gimlet eyes. Tin horn was written all over him. His meal ticket lumbered beside him. Big Spike Sullivan, well known to the habitués of the Barbary Street AC. Shoulders like an ox, big hands hanging low, half open like an ape's, matted with stiff black hair. A sullen face, jutting jaw, murky black eyes. He was as incongruous in his present setting as Lyman was. His real name sounded nothing like Sullivan. He glared around him as he shuffled up and down with Lyman. Both men walking because moving was more tolerable in that heat than just keeping still. Sullivan scowled at the tiny town across the tracks, at the man just visible inside the waiting room, and at the mongrel dog under a bench beside the wall. The dog mistook the man's glare. He stretched himself and came from under the bench, wagging his tail. Sullivan cursed him away stormily. As the impact of his angry rumble on the stillness, the man in the waiting room came to the door and surveyed the strangers impersonally. He was as much a part of the scene as they were alien to it. He was as tall as Sullivan, though lacking something of the pugilistic bulk. But he was clean-cut, forged in a mold of sun and desert that had bronzed his skin and stripped all surplus weight from his lean-waisted, thick-chested frame. Tranquilly, he folded his massive arms and stared off across the waste to where, in the distance, the train for which all three were waiting was struggling up a long grade. The dog trailed after the strangers, dejected, but still hopeful of a pat on the head. Sullivan reached the edge of the shade, turned suddenly, and fell sprawling over the surprised canine, rasping his hands on the hot cinders. The dog yelped and scurried out of reach just as Sullivan scrambled up, launching a heavy foot after him. The boot grazed the dog's back, and the animal darted under his bench and cowered there. Sullivan rushed at him, all the beast roused in him. He was hardly responsible for his actions, merely a slow-witted, evil-tempered brute who reacted unreasonably to his chance environment. "Easy, Spike," whined Lyman anxiously. "Let the mutt be." Sullivan paid no heed. Deliberately, he drew back his foot to crush in the ribs of the shivering animal when the man in the doorway took a hand in the game. With no appearance of haste, he stepped between Sullivan and the bench and pushed the man backward, not gently. "Let that dog alone," he said. "Is that your mutt?" The fighter snarled, balling his huge fist. "No, it ain't," answered the desert man. "If it was, I'd throw a hunk of lead through you. As it is, well, just then," Sullivan let go with a right that had murder behind it. Sullivan could hit. Any man who was a favorite in the Barbary Street AC must be a puncher. The desert man was caught flat-footed. Square in the jaw, he took the full drive of Sullivan's murderous right. Lyman yelped and jumped back to let the victim fall clear, but he did not fall. He reeled backward from the impact, with blood starting from the corner of his mouth, but he kept his feet. And Sullivan, instead of following up, gaped and half lowered his hands with the surprise of it. And that was Sullivan's mistake. The desert man's return was like the strike of a big cat. Cinders spurted from under the balls of his feet as he hurtled in, and his left fist crunched savagely into Sullivan's ribs. He was wide open. Sullivan's fist slugged home. No man had ever stood up against him and outslugged him in the Barbary, where the toughest ham and eggers of the West Coast display their wares. Well, the stranger knew nothing of boxing. His blows were swings, but each carried behind it the weight of the broad shoulders and the drive of the muscular thighs. He seemed built of granite and steel. Sullivan's fist tore skin and brought blood, but the man shook them off, redoubling his fury. Desperation grew in Sullivan's eyes as his breath began to whistle between his teeth. No human could take what he was handing out, yet this man was taking it. An agonized grunt burst from Sullivan as his opponent's left, smashing through his weakening guard, sank wrist deep in his belly. Involuntarily, his hands went down, and for the first time, the stranger's mallet-like right exploded square in the prizefighter's face. Sullivan's features vanished in a flood of crimson. With a groan, he staggered, groping, and the stranger threw his right again, as a man throws a hammer. At its impact, Sullivan went down sideways and lay where he fell. The mongrel crawled from under his bench, whimpering. Inside, the click-click of the telegraph was the only sound. The station agent had not left his seat. Impassively, he stared through the open window. Who are you?" whispered Al Lyman, tugging at his sweat-soaked collar as if it choked him. "Kirby Carnes," answered the other briefly, turning to glance down at the shaking manager. "Whoa, are you a fighter?" Lyman asked. He seemed to have forgotten Sullivan lying there on the cinders. What do you do for a living? Did you ever fight in the ring, I mean?" Carnes shook his head. "I've been dressing tools in the San Pedro oil field lately. Until they shut down, I'm looking for a job now." Well, what that shows you, it paints a picture. You've got two guys squaring off. One of the things that Howard does well, really well, is describe action. And his depiction of boxing is very accurate. One of the things we were gonna do today, I brought my gloves. We were gonna act out a scene and punch. And the reason for that was not to hurt each other. It was to show you, when you lead with your left and you hook off that, or he'll talk about throwing a punch and hooking off it and coming back. These are real tactics, and people that write boxing fiction don't generally dwell on the technique, or if they do, they lose sight of the story, and you get caught in the humdrum of angles and cuts. And this, he seamlessly welds action and technique like I haven't seen really done, and he does it from story to story to story to story. It isn't like a one-shot catch lightning in a bottle. This guy's got it. He understood boxing. He understood angles. He understood, like he always talks about leading with the left, and he will go out of his way to tell you if he's fighting a southpaw. He says, "Wow, he's leading with his right." So I unconsciously shifted away from his power. Just little things that you only know. Even you can't really even get a grasp of that unless you're sparring, at least getting in with somebody else and rubbing cuts. And that's what he did. And one of the reasons why I read that particular story is I like it. It's the Southwest. I made an argument a long time ago that Howard was an American writer. I mean, just the quintessential American writer. Them's fighting words for the Sumerian. and he took it a step further and said, "Let me open your eyes to this, brother. He's a Southwest. He's a Texas writer." And you can see in the description the heat. It's so hot and humid. I'd rather move around than just sit in this heat. The hot cinders at the railway station. All the little things that just kind of pass along as you read. Almost like when you're driving through a car, you see the scenery, but you don't see the scenery until something really sticks out. Howard does that and still gives you action. He still drives the narrative along, and you realize 4 pages just went by. That's, to me, the hallmark of a really, really good storyteller.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why I chose that instead of humor.
Yeah.
I love the Koskinen stuff, don't get me wrong, but I think some of his dramatic, like the big three, I think they deserve a little more respect.
I do, yeah. For the boxing books, I told you there's going to be 4 volumes. They're going to come out as quickly as they can, obviously. What we did is Patrice was preparing the typescripts, and the reason why the project took as long as it did is there's a bittersweet reason for this. When Glenn Lord passed, the foundation undertook to start preserving the documents, and along the way they found different typescripts, different drafts that they didn't realize Glenn had, and I don't think Glenn remembered because, well, he had 10,000 pages. You're gonna forget a couple of things, and so we went back in, and Patrice said, "I found this. It's a fragment. What do you think?" And we always said, "Yes, put it in."
Yes.
So this project will be the first project that benefits from full access to the Glenn Lord archive.
The trunk. Sorry.
Huh?
That's not right.
What is?
What now?
Science Fantasy was.
Ah, okay. All right.
Oh, so we're at least not missing something new again.
No, we're not missing anything new. So everything's going to be in there now, which is good. But what we did is when Patrice would hand us the manuscripts, we'd go through it. We'd talk about word choices and if we're going to change this or that or the other. and what we're keeping and what we're not doing. And most of it was just editing for corrections or making sure that the text made the transition. And Grube and I conspired early on that this is how we were going to do the intros. We're going to alternate intros and weave them together kind of as a seamless conversation, exactly like how we do these. Which is kind of funny. So Chris gets volume 1 and volume 3. I get volume 2 and volume 4. So Chris gets to start it, I get to end it, and in the middle we each get to talk about Costigan. So everybody, it worked out. It worked out. Yeah. So the format is going to be, all the early stuff is in the first volume with the poems and the fragments. It's not strictly in the same. It's not strictly in chronological order for the reason that there's so much of it. It's hard, it would have broken weird and looked strange and all that. So all the early stuff is in the first volume. Volume 2 and 3, all Costigan. 2 full volumes of nothing but Costigan. And then volume 4 is all the Kid Allison stuff and all the later drafts and versions and incarnations and
Dorgan's been returned.
Yeah.
Cognomen. Dennis Dorgan. There's one. Dennis
Mark
Dorgan.
knows that 6-7 years ago I said that's what I would like to see. So
Yeah.
you have to explain.
The only there's a single Dorgan story in there now, which was the story that Howard wrote, where he didn't change the name.
The Dennis Dorgan story, and it also was. It was definitely a different feeling. It was a.
Yeah.
It was like
There's more Costigan stories than
not a Clarny.
anything else.
It's almost like a Steve Harrison.
It feels like a Steve Harrison. Yeah, it's a little more action adventure.
Like a Graveyard Rats.
So yeah, well, only with boxing.
Yeah.
So so that's what's coming out, and hopefully they're going to roll out pretty quickly. We're all really happy with the Thomas Johnny covers. Do you guys have any questions, or is there anything that you want to know?
A pair of gloves, because I brought a pair. I mean, we could throw bets down right now.
Yeah, we can absolutely bare knuckle if you'd like.
We got a little recipe to pour in the cuts. I think we're all right.
Right. If you guys are interested.
Question for
Yes,
you.
sir.
In the pictures that we've seen of Howard in his fighting position,
Yeah.
some of them look a little bit lame.
They're exaggerated.
There's the one where he's a skinny teenager and he's got the gloves way up there. The gloves look bigger than he is. And then there's one where he's in his underpants and he's more closed up, but it's still a pretty open stance.
And then there's the one on the during Rob. What's it called? It's the Cisco Dam, right?
Yeah. Where
And there's that one too. These are, I think, especially that one. I think they're exaggerated poses, trying to emulate action. Just because back then they had, you had a black and white grainy photo, and I think they're trying. I want to show you that I'm bringing it from my hip, because a lot of the Costigan stories, especially, you're talking. This is all tall tale stuff. This is hyperbole. This is. Last week, you have no idea, buddy. I was fighting so and so out in the cornfield. Oh, really? How'd that go? Well, let me tell you.
It was a war.
It was. You see this cut here? And it's probably a 3 or 4 year old scar, but it's going to do for the story that we're going to tell. And by the way, I had him, but three jokers jumped out of the bag. I didn't know his friends were hiding in the weeds, waiting for something to go wrong, and they jumped me. I had to take care of them, so it took a little bit longer. That kind of tall tale stuff. So I think also, in addition to trying to show action, I think also he got a visual pictorial from the National Police Gazette, the Ring magazine, which featured the old-time Golden Era boxes, which is
That
what
goes
he
back
was.
to what I was talking about
Yes.
earlier, is why they held their hands this
That's
way.
right.
It's the old time when they didn't have the gloves, they tried to catch the
Right.
arms up here first. Later when they got the gloves, they could deflect the glove with a glove, because you've got one. And all this kind of stuff, when you do this in a real fight, it hurts.
Yeah.
Because when they hit you, it hurts. I mean, I know. And so that's why you see these exaggerated poses sometimes, if he's copying it off of the old magazine where they were, like this, because they were catching them out here.
The cigarette cards had those too.
Also, Indy, to my knowledge, he didn't have a coach. So these guys were windmilling, I guarantee you, inside this place. They were. In the first
Harry
time-
Grubb.
Yes. Or Joe Graham, Harry
Hit with this
Grubb.
part of their knuckles too.
Yeah. Ooh.
And so it is what it is. At least we have the pictorial evidence that he was interested in the sport. Number one. Number two, though, I think that until anybody actually even just spar, just see how hard it is to pump those fists for 3 minutes. You'd be surprised.
Oh,
it'll make
holding
a
your
strong
arms
man
up
weak.
way, yeah.
Yeah.
He'll understand right away.
Second hardest thing to do in sports.
You know, boxing. I talked about this in my introductions, and I've been talking about it for a long time. It's the in between civilization and barbarism, really is, because boxing is, compared to a lot of sports, it is science of angles, it's science of feint, and when I say throwing angles, if you're stepping towards me, right, and he keeps catching me with that jab, one of these times I'm going to slip through, I'm going to pop it,
Right.
Little subtle things, and Howard puts it into this fiction. And these are the things that excite me as somebody who has boxed and kickboxed and done these things. I love reading them. Go, wow, because I read modern sports fiction, and it ain't the same.
It's you just said the difference, the science and barbarism is perfect.
Well, that's what Costigan is.
That's right.
He's really always helping out the
Sven.
the Dame or his lunky buddy Sven Larson. Or he's always the guy, the shield. It's the shield wall. He's like the human shield wall for civilization against barbarism. And the reason why is because he is as close as you can get. That's why they talk about him as if he's an atavist, as if he's he's a throwback.
Almost every Costigan story refers to him in some capacity as a gorilla, either in stature, in appearance. He's mistaken for a gorilla.
The science
twice.
The science of the time was preoccupied with this kind of stuff. One of the things I've done and we've done is we've decided, not only do I want to tell you how great these stories are and hope you read them and come away with the same feeling I do, but as you think you need, if you're really truly a scholar or a real fan of Howard, you need to read the stories, because what they do is they reflect. That's the one opportunity you'll have where he's talking about the modern world in which we all exist. All his boxers, they fight with, or they reference real boxers of that time or just prior. I mean, so he's testing theories. In his story, he's testing theories. What's the guy's Joe? Was it Joe Goddard with the extra thick head? They measured this boxer's skull. These are real things. He gets mocked now because, well, geez, everybody knows that can't be. Well, back then they were testing these scientific theories. Do certain people have thicker skulls? And if they do, are they atavistic? Should they be culled? We're talking all kinds of eugenics, psychology, and science mixed together. Well, he was a reader, voracious. He was a historian. These are things that excited him intellectually, and that, again, they reflect him as a person, because he's testing this stuff out in the only way he can. Because when I'm reading a Conan story, I know it's in the dim, distant past. I can get away with a lot because there was nobody around to correct me. But now he's got Costigan, whose older brother Mike is one of the roll call of Iron Men, and he's fighting real fighters with real names that you can go look up right now on BoxRec.com, for instance. Go to IMDb's website.
Cyberboxing Zone.
Yeah, it was Cyberboxing Zone. This is your opportunity. Again, I say this over and over and over again. This is your opportunity to get to know your author. You know them. I mean, this is it. They're worth something, and they're worth being taken seriously. That's my second reason for doing all this. Because I except for Tim Arney, I got a lot of feedback.
That's right.
Okay. I got a lot of feedback that was, hey, this stuff is moronic. It's silly.
But the other side of it is,
I was too stupid to listen.
I know, and Rusty will readily admit now that the reason why there's boxing stories in the 2-volume best of is because me and Gruber wouldn't shut the hell up about it.
Well, any best of collection that doesn't have the bulldog breed in it,
or the fighting pair.
Or the fighting pair. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything else we can read? Is there anything else you want to know about? Yes, sir.
Just say, as closely connected as I am with the Conan stuff, I think the boxing stuff is the most consistently solid set of writing that he does.
Yeah.
Even amongst Conan, you have some clunkers.
There are some, yes.
But with the boxing stuff, it's amazingly consistent.
Well,
yeah.
Let me can I address that?
Feel free. Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you.
I really agree with the Costigan assessment. What I would say is, having gone through every little piece, some of the early efforts of his boxing stuff really they suffer under scrutiny. But like Man of Peace, for instance, Man of Peace, never published, but what a cool story. he's basically taking the whole idea of, well, a naturalist approach to boxing. He's describing, for the first time really in fiction, where he's describing people as animals, and he's giving them animal-like attributes, and then he contrasts that against nature, the barren wastes of the North versus the hot box of the South. He gives everything a life. Okay, so he's already, and he's using boxing as the crucible for these ideas. And as he matured, there's no, in my opinion, there's no mistaking how good the Conan stories could be. He was getting older, number one. He was perfecting his craft. I mean, the guy was in his 20s when he's doing most of this stuff, early 20s.
I'll be the first to admit that not all the boxing stories are golden gems, but because he wrote so many, there tend to be more better ones than not.
Just taken as sort of a percentage wise.
Yeah, straight percentage. Yeah.
I think it's cool you feel that way too, by the way. I like that, bro.
There's more of them than the Conan.
And yeah, twice as many. And the worst. I will tell you that the worst boxing story is better than Veil of the Lost Women. So there it is, folks.
We're the Black Stranger.
Settle down, you. That's enough from the peanut gallery.
This is an opportunity to ask us some down and dirty questions.
Shanks, have we left anything off? Is there anything we didn't hit or cover?
No, I think y'all.
Yeah.
We'll get some questions over here.
You want to hold off on the
Yeah.
gazetteers? Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
one
No,
thing
we'll do that.
like, I'm kind of interested in is just like how much of himself Howard put into everything he wrote. But do you think it'd be fair to say that the Bulldog breed might be his most personal story?
I would definitely. This is all opinion, guys. Okay, we can't get in his head, but I'm going to go with a yes on that. That fighting his pair. There's another one where Mike gets stolen.
It's the one where he's mistaken for a gorilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look out, boys! Cussing's on the loose.
No, the gorilla's loose. They call him the gorilla. I love that. Look out, it's a griller.
I would definitely.
yeah.
Honestly, yes.
Anytime a dog shows up, you can bet Howard's heart is on the page.
That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons also with Fist of the Desert. Well, actually, there's been a number of dogs in his boxing fiction. There's also one in Conan's. Was it Slasher?
Beyond the Black River?
Yeah. Balthus and Slasher. Yeah.
So dogs are featured prominently, and it's kind of neat because when you go back to the golden era of boxing, every boxer. Well, you look at these old photos, and I bet you know what I'm talking about. They always had a pit bull running around the camp, or a bulldog, because it was part of the image back then. Howard was very astute student of the game, and all these little seemingly incongruous clues, they really actually are a breadcrumb trail to his interests.
Bulldogs were also, American Bulldogs were part of the Navy. They were Navy mascots.
Right. Yeah.
There's one more thing that we're going to talk about, and this has kind of been a little secret project. In addition to the 4-volume set that's coming out, me, Grube, Jeff Shanks, and Brian Leno, who's another boxing guy that's not here, the 4 of us are working on a gazetteer for the boxing universe. Yeah. And it's going to be all the people, every place, all the nautical, Costigan A to Z, all the nautical terms, all the boxing terms. We're going to talk about the ports that he used and talk about what they were in the 20s. There's going to be some essays in there, and we're going to publish this independently of the 4 books, but it will absolutely be a companion piece. So there may be some of you who are like, I hear what you're saying, Mark. Chris, you make a compelling case. I just don't know if I could spend the time and energy doing all the research you've done to get the boxing stories. Fear not, my friend. Yeah. This book is the unofficial 5th book in the series, and it will.
This is my Howard Finn column, actually.
Yeah, it really is, and so it's going to have maps. It's going to have drawings. My buddy John Lucas is going to do some artwork for the thing. Oh yes, and you know how he gets that cartoony kind of wonky. His Costigan is so sweet. I think you guys are really going to love it, and it's going to be it's a labor of love. We're right now cutting up the stories and taking them apart to do all this stuff. So those of you with even a middling interest in this,
it's going to be cool.
I think it's going to be very cool. We're really stoked about it.
One of the reasons
And none of us have the time to do this, by the way, but we're making time because it's that cool.
When I was in Ruhupa, I did a Coskin A to Z, right?
Yep.
A bunch of them. And one of the things I was really fascinated with was this universe, the boxing universe, was so cohesive. It was like the precursor to Conan's world. The whole timeline, excuse me, from Cole to Conan,
Right.
and Brandon Moore on, and here he'd already tested the waters.
Yeah,
Right?
he does.
Created himself a universe.
Yeah, it's a shit. Yeah, he doesn't get credit for it, but every time he goes to Singapore, the same AC's there, the same characters there.
That's exactly
Billy
right.
Ash from the Tribune shows up in the same places, and so
Billy Ash being.
the reporter in the Kid Allison stories.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
He's not just weaving within Costigan. He's weaving in with
The
other
straight boxing
boxers
as well.
Straight boxing,
Right.
the dramatics.
right.
Brennan, Kirby Carnes. In fact, Brennan fights Jack Maloney.
Right.
Oh, that's right, he does.
They always come back. So what we have is here's a guy over a 10-year period remembering the details. That's how much he cared about this stuff.
And I know we kind of get the credit for breaking this stuff up, but it's because nobody's wanted to read it all before. But yeah, it's cool that it's all there, and it is a cohesive universe. It doesn't have the historical pull that Conan does. He was trying to do something different with the Conan world, and Jeff's got his own separate thing about the way that he built Kull and Conan and using the tenets of theosophy and archaeology of the time. This is a different thing, but it's still world building. And he's doing the same kind of thing in the same kind of way. So very interesting stuff.
I have a question.
Yes, Barbara.
We know that he said to Novelin at one point that he did not have a great cause or a great love. And then in one of his letters to, I think it was HPL, he says that he wished he had been a sports figure, that he thinks he would have been happy. And I wonder if he had gone into boxing instead of writing, he would have been, whether he.
I think part of there's two answers to this. Yeah. Part of that was in the middle of the debate versus barbarism and civilization, and Lovecraft was arguing, intelligence versus physical, mental versus physical, and so Howard was over exaggerating that point to make that to make the point for Lovecraft.
As much as he loved boxing,
but
not an
He was a writer. I think he was a writer.
But
that was what he was going to do.
I think.
But in more than one story, or more,
I don't think anything satisfied him.
I think he would have liked to have done some of that. Yeah.
Like we've talked about, I don't think anything would have satisfied him on that day.
Right.
Maybe the next day would have been different.
Speculation from here.
Yes.
You're exactly right.
Yes, we're now into the nobody knows for sure.
There are several passages though in his letters where he'll make a statement. I wish this. And in fact, if we go back, I can show you. But then he'll I don't know if he's trying to appease H.P. Lovecraft or what. But then he'll say, "Well, I didn't really say that. What I'm really trying to say is this." So I think Joe's probably a little closer to the truth.
We read the letters as static things.
Exactly.
As Howard is writing them, he's feeling these things very powerfully.
Yeah.
And of course, he's having that conversation.
He
with
said
Lovecraft.
boxing
Well-
was tied to humanity is what he said.
Isn't that around the time he wrote to HP and said that the high point of his life was a boxing match?
Yeah.
One night in a sweltering night in a abandoned ice house.
We fought each other to a standstill.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now did it really happen?
What it comes down to is that part of the boxing thing was a rebellion. His mom didn't want him to play football. She didn't want him to get hurt. I think this was a thing that he could do that was his own. It was kind of I'm going to go be who I need to be, and I'm also going to carve a little respect out for myself. And so I think it was part of his identity. One of my favorite conversations he has in the letters, one of the paragraph starts, it says, he doesn't say example, he starts a new paragraph to say, I am boxing. Yeah. You knew what I was going with that. And it's just, so.
Like everything else in his life, there was a conflict between the physical and the intellectual part
Yes.
that wrote.
That's a
Part
pressure
of that
from
is where you live, because I had the same thing.
you and I are on the same page,
I
man.
had to get tough because I was interested in books and I was interested in art and all that. And my father was a boxer and a wrestler and all that stuff. So he had this, I come from this background of these tough guys.
Yeah, exactly.
All the people around me were tough guys. So I had to find a way to do that. And it turned out I actually was very, very good at it. But I balanced the two.
That's
When I
saying,
found that, I actually think it made me a more solid person in many other ways.
Exactly.
I think when he was boxing, he was at his happiest.
Yeah, I do too.
There's a lot of
I thoroughly agree with you.
Yeah.
there's a lot of clues in the letters
Yeah.
to that.
Probably a good place to end.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Listen, thank you guys so much for showing up. Really, thank you. Really appreciate it. We're gonna go back to the ice house and drink for a little bit, but.